So two countries that are not countries at the time are going to be unified as one finally, for our purposes anyway. And what two countries are those, just judging by these two flags? Not Canada. It is, I heard it earlier, it's Italy. This is not the Mexican flag. Mexican flag is different. And then Germany, yes. So we have two countries, Germany and Italy. Now, we've sort of mentioned probably Italy's name a couple of times this year. And for good reason, because even as an ununified country, they're still called Italian and Italian states. But Germany is going to be this new name for a country, and it's going to make up of two large principalities and some about 40 other smaller ones that will make up Germany. And Germany comes from the Germanic language, a language that they speak in that area. So, which is where they get their name from. So, let's move on then. So, using nationalism as a unifying force for those two countries. So, we've talked about a couple of these things, talked about them last class. We have, and you don't write any of this down new on your notes, but the Congress of Vienna, again, is going to sort of move us into this era of nationalistic feelings. Instead of fighting with people abroad, different countries, there's going to be a lot of fighting within to decide who's going to rule the country. Is it going to be a king, or are we going to choose for ourselves, or is it going to be somewhere in between? Three separate political views are going to emerge. This idea of conservative, going back to the ways of having a king rule your country. Liberal, which is like, we need to vote on people to do all of the stuff for us. Let's vote on representatives so that they can do all the deciding for us. At least we have a say in who governs us. And then there's going to be a radical view. And the radical view is we all need to vote on everyday things. We need a true democracy where we vote on every law, on every person that's appointed, on everything that there is. In Greece, Greece is going to fight for its independence. They're going to win in 1821. In 1830, Belgium, a very small country, is going to revolt against the Dutch, which is Denmark, to get their independence. 1848, lots of things happen. The revolutions of 1848, a lot of fighting from within. But the Czechs are going to, the Czechs and the Hungarians are going to revolt. Again, making all these independent countries that were once ruled somewhere else. 1861, Russia frees their serfs. And what did we decide that a serf was the other day? It's kind of like a slave, right? So again, this idea of individual liberties, right? And then foreshadowing today a little bit. In 1871, both Italy and Germany are going to unite from being separate nations from within that same general area. All right, so what is nationalism? We talked about this the other day. Here's another solid definition for you. It's an undying loyalty and devotion to your state, meaning your country. And it usually depends on this idea of a common culture and a common history. A common culture and history. Now, what are a couple of things that bring Americans together under this idea of a common history and a common culture? Now, America is a very, very different nation when it comes to this idea. But in a weird way, well, let me get some ideas. What brings Americans together? What's the common history or the common, what's a common theme for all Americans? Say it again. What do you mean, political parties? Or like partying it up? Political parties? Okay, maybe. Political views? That brings people together. What else? with some ideas. We have political parties. Voting. Okay, so the idea that we should have some say in government, that's a good one. Let's get somebody else. Johnson, what's one thing that brings Americans together with a common history? All Americans. Now, we're a very diverse nation. But what brings us together? What's that? Okay, so what do you mean? Go a little further than that. What do you mean by that? I'm sorry? Can't hear you. You have to speak up a little bit. Okay, money? All right. We'll get into that a little bit later. What brings Americans together? Brianna, what do you think? What brings Americans together? A couple big things. Big ideas. No, I'm saying there are a couple big ideas that bring us together. Give me one. Let me ask you a different way. All right, entertainment. TV shows brings Americans together. So we have a common want for entertainment. I'll put it down there just to make you feel good. Let's think a little bit deeper. We know that America is made up of people from all different backgrounds, different languages, different everything. But there are a couple of ideas, big ideas, that bring us together. What would those be? Gabby, what do you think? How about this? What brings people to America from outside of America? That's a big one, right? The opportunity to do a lot of things, right? The opportunity to go from being dirt poor to incredibly rich. The opportunity to have what other kind of things? What else do you have here that you might not have in other countries? Okay, jobs. So that goes back to the opportunity and something that Johnson said about money. Yes? Education, right? So that all goes under this opportunity. There's one more big thing that I'm looking for. What's one thing that we have here? Patriotism, yes, but that sort of all goes under this idea of nationalism. That happens in other countries too, despite other things. Freedom. Alright, so I'll put that over here. So we have, yes, all of these other things. But the opportunity to go from dirt poor to incredibly rich. The opportunity to go and vote. It's not a law to vote, right? But we have that opportunity to have a say in government. And this big one here, freedom. We have freedoms that other countries don't have. So, no, we cannot say that we all look alike. We cannot say that we all speak alike. We cannot even say that we all like the same entertainment round, right? But what we can say is that we all have the same opportunity to do great things. And we all have certain freedoms. Right? So that brings America together. In different countries, it's going to look differently. What brings people together always looks differently depending on the country, right? That's what makes different countries different. All of these things bring together people in different ways. Sometimes it's culture. What do I mean by culture? Darnell, what do I mean by culture? What does that mean? Okay, so how they act commonly. What would be one big thing that you would do in the same culture? What's that? What same thing would that be? Give me one specific example. Somebody help them out. What's one big thing?
Language.
Okay, language is something separate, but yes. What does everybody do when they go home around 5 or 6 o'clock at night? Eat dinner, right? So eating certain meals would be a culture thing. That's the easiest example, right? You go home and eat a meal that has sometimes to deal with your culture, maybe somebody else's culture. History. Not talking about this class. History class doesn't bring people together. Usually tears them apart, or at least from the teacher. Just kidding. But history brings people together. You share the same victories or losses, right? Americans can say that they fought in many wars. They've lost some, they've won some. But they share that common history. Language, like Aruma had said. That one is a little different for our country. And sometimes, for our country's purposes, brings us apart. Or tears us apart, because there are people out there that think that English is the official language of the United States. But in fact, what is the official language of the United States? What's that? None. We do not have one. We do not have an official language in the United States. But there are some, I'll say it, ignorant people out there that think that English is the only thing that should be spoken in America. But that goes against all of those values that bring us together. Because we are a nation made up of immigrants. Alright, moving on. Territory. What does that mean? How can territory bring you together? It's where you live, right? You live near somebody, right? I gave you the example of a neighborhood the other day. We all went to different elementary schools, right? That's your neighborhood school. But we all come together at West Potomac High School. Nationality, that's a little bit of a different one. But just being an American brings you together with Americans. Think of the Olympics. Right? You root for the country that you have a nationality towards, usually, right? And then religion. Religion is the big one. Right? You can say that you look different, you speak differently, you have different culture, different history, different language. You can say all those different things. However, around the winter time, there's a major holiday that a lot of people celebrate in America. What is that holiday? It's Christmas, right? And the majority of Americans are Christian, right? Or at least practice Christianity in some way, and that brings them together in one, as a common bond. All right, moving on. So, Italy. Getting back to the 1850s or so. Italy is not one nation. It is broken up into what we call independent city-states. Think of it as American states. How many states are there in America? 50. Whew, thank you. You saved me. I thought nobody would. Yeah, there are 50 states in America. Think of us all as different countries. If we were all different countries, it would be pretty difficult to manage, right? Think about our example. We live in Northern Virginia. We're very close to Washington, D.C., and very close to Maryland. Imagine going to Maryland. Who goes to Maryland on a regular basis? All right. Eliezer, let me ask you this. When you go to Maryland, do you have to exchange money? No. In Maryland, do you have to have a passport to go there? No, right? You can just go there freely because we live in the same country. Now, there are some state laws that sometimes are different, but they're similar. At the time, it would be almost as if you were going to a different country if you were to go to Maryland, if you lived in Italy at the time, right? You'd have to exchange money. There'd be a completely different set of laws. You'd have somebody completely different ruling over you. It was very different. Even though they were brought together by common language, common history, and territory, they were very, very different in terms of who ruled them. Even foreign countries ruled over some of these Italian city-states. But there's going to be a group of people that tried to bring it together. Starting with this guy named Mazzini. And Mazzini, he starts this movement called Young Italy. He says, look, we're all Italians. We should come together and be one nation. And he uses nationalism to do that. He says, we all have common bonds. We speak the same language. What language do they speak in Italy at the time, or at least a derivative of? Well, Italian, but it comes from Latin, right? So they all have a common language. They have a common history. But the biggest thing is that they live on the same country. I'm gonna come back to this. But they all live within this little boot thing. Right? We're close together. Why not be a country? It doesn't make sense. So Mazzini, looking good there, he brings together this nationalistic idea that we're all the same. We should be one country. And we have two completely different guys that are going to unify different parts of Italy two different ways. First is Giuseppe Garibaldi. And he unifies the southern part of Italy through something called guerrilla warfare. Now, guerrilla warfare, we're going to have to find out what that was. What does this term guerrilla mean? And no, I don't mean the type of guerrilla that you're thinking. It's spelled differently, it looks different, and it is very different. But what does this kind of guerrilla mean? What do you think, Leslie? Good morning. What does this kind of guerrilla mean? I'm not talking about like the gorilla. I'm talking about a different kind. Ever heard that word before? No. Anybody ever heard this word before? Alright, Sean, Eliezer, JT have? Alright, well, it's a different kind of warfare, so that means fighting. But what kind? Sean, give me a gander here. So it's this. You're right. It's a series of attacks and retreats and attacks and retreats. There's no organization to it, or at least it doesn't appear that there's no organization. So next to guerrilla, since 90% of you didn't know what it means, it's unorganized fighting, and the reason to do it this way is to scare the crap out of your enemy. To scare your enemies. If you do it this way, if you use guerrilla warfare tactics, they never know when you're coming at them. You can do it in little spurts. You can use the element of surprise. Right? You can take a small group, attack, kill a few people, retreat, so that you don't lose any men. Right? This idea of guerrilla warfare works very effectively in southern Italy. And Garibaldi is able to unify southern Italy. Alright, let's move on. Let's see what another guy does, completely opposite of Garibaldi. In the northern part, we have Count Cavour, and he unifies Italy through diplomacy. Another big word. What does the word diplomacy mean? Who has heard of the word diplomacy? Same people. Who's never heard the word diplomacy? Okay, so I have 6 people listening. All right, cool. So let's see here. Katie, give me a definition for diplomacy, or at least what it sort of means. Yes, you know what you're doing. What else? Yes, it's organized. But it's not fighting at all. At least not like a shooting or anything like that. Eliezer, diplomacy, what does it mean?
I heard of it, just never actually spoke to it before.
Okay, that's completely honest. I like it. Sean?
Peacefully.
Peacefully. Alright, so it is very peaceful. But if you're not fighting, what can you be doing? What's that? Speaking, right? You are having a negotiation with somebody else. So it's peaceful negotiation. Peaceful negotiation. What he's saying is, Count Cavour, he goes to meetings with these different people who are ruling the country, these independent city-states, and he says, hey, look, I know you might lose a little power, but we need to come together and be one Italy, and not 50 different Italies. Right? He comes together and he says, look, there's this guy that I want to be president of Italy. His name's Victor Emmanuel. And if you come together, if you help us unify, we promise you that you'll have a high governing position. So, again, he's negotiating because the people who are ruling those countries, they're going to lose a little bit of power. But at least they'll have somebody, Victor Emmanuel, and Count Cavour in their back pocket, right? Sort of makes sense, I hope. All right. So very, very different. Again, we have Garibaldi, guerrilla, right? Garibaldi, guerrilla, meaning using those fighting tactics. And then we have Cavour using diplomacy, negotiations. We'll scratch your back if you scratch ours kind of mentality. But it always comes down to fighting, right? So then you have the north versus the south. You have Count Cavour up here saying, hey, let's be friends. You have Garibaldi down here chasing you around with guerrillas. No, I don't mean it like that. Right? And then they're going to fight over control of Italy. Count Cavour is eventually going to win. That's the guy. Who was Count Cavour? Which one did he have? He had the north, and he used peaceful negotiation, right? They come together, and his guy, Victor Emmanuel, becomes the president of Italy. Woohoo, we have Italy. Except for part of it. We're going to have a certain region in Italy. So we have the north and the south. They're going to come together and become Italy. But we're going to have a portion in here that is going to remain independent. There's a very important city in this middle part right here. What important city is that? Rome. We have Rome here in the middle. And it's important for very, very many reasons. However, there's one large reason that Rome remains independent. It wants to stay away from becoming part of Italy. What is it about Rome that they want to stay independent? They have something to most people way more important than a king. What's that? They have the Pope, right? Rome is the capital city of Catholicism. They have control over millions and millions of people in the form of religion. And the Pope, the leader of that, lives in Rome. So you have this group right here, and they're actually called the Papal States. Remember we did that map in the beginning? Papal States. And they say, no way. We're going to lose way too much power. We're not coming together with you. So we have this weird looking Italy that is made up of the north and the south. But guess what? We still have Count Cavour, and we still have Victor Emmanuel, the great negotiators. And by 1871, Rome and the Papal States are eventually going to join Italy, and they become one unified nation. The nation that we think of it as today. That crazy looking boot that goes out into the Mediterranean Sea comes together. 1871. Although they come together with peaceful negotiation, there is still some fighting that goes on, right? But it's going to be very, very different. Italy's unification has become, I wouldn't say very different, I would say slightly different than the next country, and that is Germany. Any questions on Italy's unification? All right, we'll move on to Germany. Like Italy, Germany is made up of 48 independent city-states at the time, all ruled by different princes. Now, what is a prince? What's a prince? It's a king's son, right? So they're all ruled by different people. All that want to gain more and more power, but they don't, right? But there are two major centers of power in this whole like independent city-state Germany thing. And those two things are Austria and Prussia. Now that's not Russia, it's Prussia, it's different. Two major centers of power in this whole German unification movement. Then we have these two guys, very important. We have Wilhelm I. He becomes the Kaiser or King of Prussia. Now, Kaiser means king, means the same thing, right? Just use a different word for it. Kaiser, king. Can be easily remembered, or at least I hope. Wilhelm wants a unified Germany. That's this guy here with the crazy looking beard. He, much like Cavour and Garibaldi in Italy, want to come together. It's one Germany. Hey, we're the same people. We speak similar languages. We have a common history. We live near each other. Why don't we come together? This whole independent city-state thing is not working out. There's too much fighting going on because different princes want more land and they're trying to fight each other all the time, but we're the same people. Why are we fighting each other? That's what he said. And he appoints this guy on the right here, Otto von Bismarck, as prime minister. So as king, he has the duty of appointing other political positions, and he appoints Uncle Otto as prime minister. Now, looking at Otto von Bismarck, what do you think he's good at? William, what do you think? What is Otto von Bismarck? This guy over here What do you think he's good at? Besides growing a mustache. Well, which one is it? Which one do you think? Just from the picture. It's one of those things you said. Military. He's a big military guy. So how do you think Germany is going to become unified? Through the military. Otto von Bismarck uses this idea. He said, I'm going to go back to this. Relax. He says, you know what, Wilhelm? You gave me a job. Here you go, Omar. You gave me a job, and you want something. You want unification. So I'm going to get you unification, but I'm going to do it my way. He uses this idea of realpolitik. Looks like real politics. Realpolitik is the idea that you gain power and control by any means necessary. In other words, Guillermo, what does that mean? By gaining power and control by any means necessary. What does this last thing mean here? He'll do anything to get power. It would be as if I said, let's see here. I said, am I going to use this example? I said, Brianna, you are no longer allowed to use your phone in my classroom. And you laugh at me. Perfect. You laugh at me, Brianna, that's okay. But by any means necessary, I'm going to make sure that you don't use your phone. So, Brianna uses her phone. I take it from her. I throw it on the ground, and I stomp on it. Because by any means necessary, you're going to stop using that phone. Right? Now, that's an extreme example. At least in my terms. But that's what Otto von Bismarck is going to do. He's going to use any means necessary to do what Wilhelm wants. And that is unify Germany. So he is going to fight with his army, right? Look at this guy. He's got an army helmet on. That's pretty cool. Any means necessary. In a series of 3 wars, Bismarck is going to bring Germany together. And he says this: it is not by means of speeches and majority resolutions that the great issues of the day will be won, but by blood and iron. It is not through diplomacy, but by what? What does blood and iron mean?
Oh, the blood of people and the iron of the sword.
There you go. We are going to do it through fighting. That's how it's going to get done. Because talking and coming together and negotiating, it doesn't work. It hasn't worked. So we need to fight to get what we want. By any means necessary, realpolitik. We're going to do it. We're going to come together. So, the 3 wars, 2 of which aren't as important, the 3rd being the most important. The Danish War, where they come together, they fight away from where Austria and Prussia come together. They fight over border land from Denmark. Okay, then you have the 7 Weeks War, where Prussia provokes Austria into war. Right, those are the 2 big ones. Prussia kills Austria. Prussia grows larger, gaining territory. But then we have something that is very interesting. We have a fake telegram that was sent by somebody in the Prussian military that was publicized all over Prussia, saying that France was calling Prussia weaklings. and saying that they were going to wipe them off the face of the earth. Now, if that, say China came out and said that America was weak and China was going to kick our butts in war, what kind of emotions would that send through America? What do you think Americans would do? What? Well, they'd be angry, yeah? And what might America do? They're going to fight back. They're going to tell you, you called me weak, huh? Let's go. Come on. Bring it on. Put those hands up. Right? So what ends up happening is, even though it's a bad thing, war is never good, right? But it brings the people together. Something in your lifetime, but you were very, very young, brought America together. The attacks on the Twin Towers in 2001 brought America together like no other time in my lifetime. Because even though it was a terrible, terrible thing, most Americans, even if you don't like war, and I don't like war, wanted to get back at the people who did that. Right? We wanted answers, and we wanted to go after them very, very fervently, because they had attacked innocent people in America. So we wanted to get back at them. Right? Another example that I can use is, hopefully this hasn't happened to you. Hopefully you haven't had to experience it. But eventually in your lifetime you will. It's the death of a family member or a close friend. Once that terrible thing happens, what happens to the rest of your family? Even the distant cousins that you can't stand, and the aunt and uncle that you can't ever get away from, what happens to that family? You come together, right? You have something, even though it's terrible, you have something that unifies you together. And that's exactly what the Prussians did. Is, even though it was something terrible, even though they lied, excuse me, in this telegram, it brought them together. It brought them together to fight against France, and thus giving them the idea that, wow, look what we can do when we come together. Bismarck wins all those wars and unites Germany in 1871. And Kaiser Wilhelm I is the new leader of a unified Germany, and that is right. Pretty smart people. Pretty smart people. Now, you don't have anything else to write, but there is an effect of this, right? We have all these things. What does it all mean? Let me wrap it up for you really quickly. You have a shift in power. Back in 1815, after the French Revolution, the Congress of Vienna establishes 5 great powers in Europe: Britain, France, Austria, Prussia, and Russia. By 1871, Britain and Germany are the only ones left at the top of that list. Britain, having gone through the Industrial Revolution first, is extremely ahead of its time in terms of money, production, right? And Germany came together under the idea that you do anything that you want if you come together. You have a nationalistic spirit, and you have a really, really strong army. So, we have 2 new great powers in Europe, Britain and Germany. Now, that's not to say that other countries were not as strong, but France, after having gone through the French Revolution, sort of on the decline. They did not have the best military in the world anymore. Austria and Prussia. Prussia becomes Germany. Austria loses land and power They still remain a country for the same time. And then there's Russia. Russia. Russia still stays sort of in the 19th century. They stay in the 1800s for a very, very long time in terms of production, in terms of technology, in terms of ideas and ways they do things. And that's going to come back and haunt them, and it's going to make a big case for them to become communist in 1917. Okay, so we are finished with those notes for today.